mysterious plane crashes. Flight 191. Flight 191 doesn't refer to a specific crash but to incidents that have plagued a range of flights numbered 191. In fact, there have been so many catastrophes that, much like hotel owners who refuse to have a 13th floor, some superstitious airlines have completely done away with the number 191. Since the 1960s, 5 flights with the number 191 have ended in fatal crashes, including the worst aircraft disaster in American history. American Airlines Flight 191, which killed 273 people. Most recently, in 2012, JetBlue Airways Flight 191 made headlines after the pilot went crazy during the flight and started ranting about Jesus, terrorists, and 9/11. He was kicked out of the cockpit by the co-pilot and subdued by passengers. Later, he was put in a mental hospital. Although the misfortune of flights ending in 191 is likely a coincidence, numerologists have had a field day trying to decipher the hidden meaning of the numbers. U.S. Air Flight 427, the 132 people who boarded U.S. Air Flight 427 were expecting a short trip from Chicago to Pittsburgh. Sadly, within 10 minutes of their destination, the plane inexplicably malfunctioned and plummeted to the ground at a speed approaching 500 km per hour, 300 miles per hour. All 132 people on board died on impact. It was one of the deadliest crashes in U.S. history and created a scene so gruesome that hardened war veterans were disturbed by the carnage. Normally, investigators can establish the cause of a crash within a week or two, but for Flight 427, it took over 4 years to determine the cause of the malfunction. Examiners studied every theory imaginable and ultimately determined that a defect in the rudder caused the pilots to lose control. While unraveling that mystery, another question arose: was U.S. Air aware of the rudder problems in their 737 planes? Similar crashes in the 1990s have some convinced U.S. Air could have prevented the 427 tragedy if they'd investigated other crashes more thoroughly. Many of the victims' families sued U.S. Air Incorporated and the Boeing Company. The two companies opted to settle out of court for nearly $50 million. Air France Flight 447, in 2009, Air France Flight 447 inexplicably dropped out of the sky and plunged into the Atlantic Ocean, sending 228 people to their watery graves. There was no mayday call, and no one was aware the plane went down until hours later, when the pilots failed to make their planned contact with air traffic control. The self-flying jet was supposed to be among the safest aircraft in history, and it seemed unfathomable for it to just disappear. It was incredibly difficult to piece together the cause of the disaster. Wreckage was strewn about the ocean floor. The investigation seemed hopeless when the black boxes weren't found after 30 days, when the box's locator beacons stopped transmitting. Still, French authorities continued to search. In 2011, a private team was hired for the job, and they found the missing debris field within a week. The French Navy was able to recover the black boxes as well as more than 100 bodies. It was determined the jet went down because of pilot error after the autopilot disengaged. Although the larger mystery was finally solved, many still wonder how experienced pilots, there were 3 on board, lost control of the aircraft in a seemingly manageable situation. Egypt Air Flight 990, on Halloween Day of 1999, Egypt Air Flight 990 plunged into the Atlantic Ocean, killing all 217 aboard. The Egyptian Civil Aviation Authority, ECAA, investigated the crash, but because they had limited resources and the accident occurred in international waters, they asked if the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board would take over. The NTSB was happy to until the preliminary examination suggested foul play, after which they suggested the case be sent over to the FBI. The Egyptians staunchly refused and insisted the NTSB continue with the investigation. However, when the evidence of a criminal act continued to mount, The Egyptians decided they were capable of handling things after all, and launched their own examination. As you might expect, the American NTSB and the Egyptian ICA came to two different conclusions. The U.S. determined that the co-pilot was suicidal and deliberately took down the plane for personal, unknown reasons. The Egyptians chalked the incident up to mechanical failures. Neither explanation satisfied conspiracy theorists, who touted ideas of terrorism and plots to kill the 33 members of the Egyptian general staff who were on board. Although we may never know exactly what happened, the final exchanges on the flight's voice recorder give us a pretty good idea. The pilot was recorded saying, "What is this? What is this? Did you shut the engines?" Meanwhile, the co-pilot was repeating, "I rely on God." Pan Am Flight 7, on November 8, 1957, Pan Am's Flight 7 was just starting a luxurious, round-the-world journey when it crashed into the Pacific Ocean, killing 44 people. The wreckage was located a week later, when the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier spotted bodies floating northeast of Honolulu. Authorities were unable to pinpoint the cause of the accident, but there are several curious facts about the crash. For one, no distress calls were ever received, and the debris was far off course. Perhaps most unusual of all, the toxicology reports revealed that several of the recovered bodies had high levels of carbon monoxide in their systems. Over 50 years later, people are still searching for answers. Some of the current theories involve revenge from an angry crew member, insurance fraud, and engine failure. Question: are still thinking of traveling?